Welcome back to another tutorial. This time we're going to explore the basics of 2D animation using Adobe Flash. So in this tutorial I'll show you how to create an animation of a ball just bouncing up and down that loops. So to begin with, we need to adjust some of our properties of our document. So go over to your Properties tab in the top right corner, and we need to check our frame rate, or FPS, that's frames per second, is 24. So every second of animation there's 24 frames. And then the stage size, in this case I'm going to use 1080 HD, so that's 1920 by 1080, that's the size in pixels. Press enter, and you'll notice your stage becomes quite large on the screen, so we need to zoom out or resize that. If we have a look up here, you've got a percentage, and you can either change the percentage or fit in window and it resizes it for you, or alternatively there are some keyboard shortcuts. On a Mac it's Command plus and minus, or on a PC Control and then plus and minus, and you can zoom out and zoom in. Now we can create our actual object. So we can have a look in our toolbox, and I'll go to the oval tool. Now most of these different tools have different settings. In this case, the oval tool, the settings or the properties are available here. So you've got the fill and the stroke. The stroke is the outline, in this case is black, and the fill is the actual colour. In this case I've chosen a green. Click and drag on your stage and you can create an oval of any shape and size. If you hold shift, it will make sure it's a perfect circle. Release shift and the mouse and you've got your object there. If we have a look at the toolbox, the arrow at the very top is your selection tool, and with the selection tool you can select any part of that object, whether it's the center, the outline, or even by clicking and dragging over it you can select a whole part, and you can simply click and drag that away to break it up. It's very easy to accidentally do that and it can be frustrating, so I'll just undo that, and I'm going to convert this to a symbol. So use your selection tool to highlight your entire object, go up to modify and convert to symbol, and here you can name your symbol. So I'll call this ball1, and then your type of symbol should be a graphic, and then press OK. And you'll notice next to properties you've got your library, and we've got our symbol here. We can still edit this symbol, so it's not just a case of it being converted and that's it. You could double click on your symbol and you go inside the symbol and you can edit the different parts like you could before we converted it. And to go back, go up to your clipboard here and then your scene 1. So we've got our symbol. We want to animate this just dropping and bouncing off the bottom of the stage and back up again. So we can explore a few different principles as well as how to keyframe. At the bottom of the screen you've got your timeline. Just remember that 24 frames represents 1 second of animation. And then we've got your layer. So if we double click on layer 1 we can title that layer. So I'll call this bouncing ball for simplicity, and then press enter. And you can create as many layers as you like. Like in any Adobe application, you've got your new layer button. And you'll notice on frame 1, it's highlighted orange and you've got that black spot. The black spot represents a keyframe. Now we're going to use a process called straight ahead animation. So we're going to do frame 1, frame 2, frame 3 and so on until we finish the cycle. So we can select our symbol and now press F6 on your keyboard to add another keyframe, and you'll see in your timeline on frame 2 you've got this keyframe, and we can simply move this object. And when you do, if you struggle to keep it going in a straight line, hold shift on the keyboard and it will snap either vertically or at 45 degrees or horizontally. So hold shift, move that down a small amount, And we need to now change the shape. We need to exaggerate the movement. So as this object falls, just like in cartoon animation, we need to squash and stretch that object. So we can go back to our toolbox, we can go to our free transform tool, and we can stretch this just slightly and squash it slightly. It's important to squash and stretch at the same time so the volume of your object remains the same. Now press F6 again to add a third keyframe, and we need to move this more this time, and we need to really see the previous frames. We can do that using something called onion skinning. At the bottom of the screen, just below your timeline, you've got your onion skinning button, and if you select that, you can see the previous frames. So we need to make sure it's moved slightly more, and we can stretch and squash it even more. And the reason it's moved down further is so it accelerates. Now that's called slow in and slow out, acceleration and deacceleration. So press F6 for another keyframe, hold shift and drag that down, and we want to move it more, and we're going to stretch it slightly more and squash it slightly more, only a tiny increase each time. F6 to add another keyframe, and we're going to move this down even more, so it's got to be more than the previous movement we created. Stretch it a bit more, squash it a bit more, so you can see it's gradually changing shape. F6 for another keyframe, hold shift and drag that down. We'll stretch it a small amount again and squash it as well. F6 for another keyframe, hold shift, drag that down, and then F6 for another keyframe again, hold shift, and this time I drag it down to the floor. So you can see it's moved more and more until it hits the floor. If you need to adjust any of these frames, you can simply click on the keyframes in your timeline. You can adjust the position. So you'll notice the last three, I've not really squashed and stretched this anymore. I don't want to overdo it. I don't want to exaggerate it too much. If you need to view less or more frames using your onion skinning, you can. You'll notice above your timeline, above these keyframes, you've got your onion skinning area. You can actually adjust just by clicking and dragging. You can adjust how much is visible. I want to just view the whole lot for now. I want to see all these frames. Press F6 again to add another keyframe, and this time I'm going to squash and stretch this on the floor. So I'll move this anchor point, that's the white dot, down to the bottom. And that means when we actually squash this, it stays on the floor. So I can squash it, stretch it out, make sure the volume is the same or as close as possible. And now we can retrace our footsteps. So we can press F6 for another keyframe, and then try and trace using your onion skinning. Try and trace over the previous frames until you get to the second frame. So F6, hold shift, and we'll move this up. It's the same shape. F6, move that up again. I'm holding shift to make sure it goes in a straight line. I want to expand my onion skinning area, so I'm going to click and drag that so I'm viewing all of our frames. F6, hold shift, we'll move that up again, and this time I want to squash it and stretch it slightly to match where it was before. If you need to make some fine adjustments to the position, you can use the cursor keys on the keyboard as well. F6 for another keyframe, we'll move that up, and we're going to stretch it out, and we'll squash it to try and match the previous shape. If you need to move the anchor point, you can just drag that, position it to the middle if that helps. F6 for another keyframe, I need to expand my onion skinning area, so we'll click and we'll drag that over frame 1 again. hold shift and try and reposition that, squash and stretch it if you need to. F6 for another keyframe, we'll move that up and it's starting to go back to its original circular shape. And that should be all of that done. So we don't want to go back over our frame 1. We've only got one frame 1. So it goes back to the second frame. Okay, we can preview the animation by pressing play at the bottom of the screen. And you can see the exaggerated shape and size of that makes it flow quite nicely. You can even loop the animation by using your onion skinning area. Make sure that's over all the frames you want to loop. And then you can click on loop here. Press play, make sure your onion skinning area goes over all your frames. And that should loop quite nicely. Okay, so that flows quite well. I'm quite happy with the squash and the stretch on the floor. If you need to go back and adjust it, you can. Just press pause and then you can go back over any individual frame. Practice this. Practice does make perfect. It's quite straightforward as long as you keep trying it. If it goes wrong, don't worry, just save it and move on. In part 2, I'll show you movie clips.